Yes guys, welcome back to another Fancy Football Fix YouTube video. My name is FPL Nacho, and I know it is the middle of the international break right now, but I thought this was the perfect opportunity for us to talk about some important hot topics going into Game Week 9, which is going to include some one-week punts for those that may be Game Week 10 wildcarding, of course how the new template midfield is going to look in the future, and also those premium assets, which ones can we potentially get rid of to spread the funds elsewhere in the squad. So as always, if you are looking forward to today's video, please do consider hitting a like and smashing that subscribe button. And without further ado, let's get into today's video. Okay, first up, I wanted to talk about those premium assets that a lot of us do own right now in FPL. So first up, I think there are two different types of managers. There are the ones that have already wildcarded, maybe in Game Week 8 or in previous game weeks, and have allocated their money into at least two premium assets, maybe three in this case. So right now in the game, we only really have Haaland, Salah and Son as our premium assets. KDB is injured right now. Of course, Kane has left the league. So these are the only three that we can really start to target and invest all of our funds into. And I know a lot of people that wildcarded in Game Week 8 will own all three of these players. So what I wanted to do here is just talk through how they're getting on so far this season. And maybe which one we don't need in our squads going forward, because I think with some of the fixture swings happening around Game Week 10, we're going to need a little bit of money to allocate in certain positions to really kind of get investment in those teams. So Haaland, Salah, Son. First and foremost, Haaland being the most expensive at 14 million, Salah at 12.6 and Son at 9.5 million. Now, if we look at the XG per 90, Haaland is leading the way at 1.01, but that should come as no surprise. This guy's an absolute monster when it comes to underlying stats. Salah at 0.69 XG per 90 and Son at 0.53. But what I want to touch on first and foremost is what a lot of people are kind of getting worried about with Mo Salah is, even though the underlying numbers on the face of it do look quite good, it's the non-pen XG per 90 which is a little bit worrying regarding Mo Salah. So the non-pen XG for Mo Salah is currently 0.4 per 90. So of course, he's had a few penalties this season, which has skewed the data that you can see on your screens right now. And although having penalties in FPL is a massive benefit, that's a great thing to have for an FPL asset, we do want to see him specifically, one of the most expensive midfielders in the game, getting those big chances, accumulated XG within the game. And right now, we're not really seeing that in open play. But again, with the fixtures coming up for Liverpool, Everton at home, Forest at home, Luton away and Brentford at home, it feels almost inconceivable that Mo Salah won't get these opportunities, these big chances in these games. So first and foremost, with Mo Salah, I think he's only going to get better as the game weeks come forward, just because Liverpool's fixtures are so good. His expected assist is fantastic at 0.57 per 90. And as I said, the big chances aren't as high as what we used to see with Mo Salah at 0.92, but still decent reading. And you can see he is top for expected FPL points per 90. So first and foremost, with the premium assets, I want to state, I do think Mo Salah, of all of them, is the most important to own. Just the way it looks right now, I think he is more essential than having Son in your midfield. I know he's the most expensive, but I think you can allocate your budget elsewhere to accommodate Mo Salah into your team. So the big debate right now is Haaland essential in our FPL teams? I know a lot of brave managers went without him in Game Week 8 in their wildcards, and I do commend you in that situation. Obviously, it has paid off in that Arsenal away fixture, but I think we all knew that that was the fixture that Haaland was probably going to get little to no returns up against probably the best defence in the league in Saliba and Gabriel on their day. So XG per 90 is decent at 1.01. It's worth noting his non-pen XG is at 0.82 per 90. So still decent reading, not as high as it was last season, but again, some decent reading nonetheless. And his expected assist is never going to be high at 0.18 per 90. But the big difference between Haaland against Son and Salah is the fact that his big chances are ridiculous at 1.78 per 90. And when I look at that alone, with the fixtures coming up, Brighton at home, who are defensively very, very suspect. A Man United team who are absolutely lost right now under Ten Hag. I know it's at Old Trafford, but I just don't really view that as a difficult fixture. Then Bournemouth at home. And then what I would argue is probably the toughest fixture of the four from an attacking perspective against Chelsea away. I personally think if you're in a situation right now where you haven't already sold Haaland, I'd keep him. I think the Brighton game is fantastic. I think the Man United game is great. The Bournemouth game is great. And if you haven't sacrificed Haaland already, I don't think the time to do so is now. I think we've seen enough from Brighton defensively to know that there is going to get a lot of chances in that game. Now, of course, if you want to allocate your budget elsewhere, then by all means, get rid of Erling Haaland. But the numbers that I'm seeing on my screen right now, the fixtures that are coming up, I personally think it would be a mistake selling Erling Haaland. So it comes down to Son. Now, Son right now has been probably the most bought player over the last few game weeks because he's playing as a forward in this Spurs team who are playing so well, and they should have scored a hatful of goals against Luton in those opening 15 minutes. So the XG per 90 at 0.53, his non-pen XG is exactly the same because he hasn't taken a penalty for Spurs, and his expected assist is really good at 0.3 as well. Big chances, slightly less than the other two. And in terms of the predicted points over the next 4 game weeks, they are less at 19.3. So the situation right now with the premiums is this. If you can afford all 3, then I think it's absolutely fine. Get them into your teams because all 3 of these are brilliant FPL options. But with the next few game weeks for Spurs being Fulham at home, Palace away, Chelsea at home, Wolves away, I think they're decent fixtures for Spurs and Son. My main worry with Son is that whereas Haaland and Salah, we can almost guarantee they're going to play 90 minutes, Son has been coming off early around the 70th, 75th minute on a regular occurrence. And although this might not be consistent throughout because we might see him actually improve his fitness and the injury might go away, we know he's holding right now, I am a little bit worried that a 70-minute Son is just not as good value as the likes of Salah and Haaland. So for me, I think if you could hold Son for game week 9, that is the way to go right now. But after game week 9, maybe in game week 10, he would be the cash cow in my eyes of the premium options to invest elsewhere in some players that I think are going to become the template midfield in the upcoming game weeks. And let me show you what that midfield would look like. Okay, so here are the 4 players that I really do think are going to become very staple picks in our template teams for game week 10 and beyond, especially for those that are looking to wildcards. So a few of these are differentials. A couple of these are already in the template team of the game week 9 wildcards or game week 8 wildcarders. So Martinelli, Maddison, Bowen and Matoma. Those are the 4 players that I'm looking at right now. And as I mentioned, I think Mo Salah is just essential in anybody that is building a team right now. So just assume Mo Salah is locked into our FPL team. So a couple of these are a little bit rogue. I would say Martinelli is probably under that category right now. But with him returning from injury in game week 8, I think Martinelli needs to be on all of our radars right now, mainly because of his price point at 7.7 million. Now, firstly, I want to touch on Martinelli. The XG per 90 so far this season is not good. 0.2 is probably one of the worst of all of the Arsenal midfielders. But remember, he has been out with injury, and also I just don't think he has been playing too well when Arsenal were not actually playing well from an offensive perspective. XA as well, 0.06. Just really poor underlying numbers, and I get it. You might be reading this thinking, not the best numbers. I'd rather invest my money in Odegaard or Saka, which is totally understandable. But when we are building a wildcard team, if we are looking to at least own 2 premium assets in Haaland and Salah in particular, we need to find those little opportunities where we can save a bit of cash and afford the premiums. And I think maybe a Saka versus Martinelli is the case. Now, the reason why I like Martinelli is because he has been featuring in this Arsenal team alongside Nketiah. And we know that when Nketiah and Martinelli play alongside one another, because Nketiah's game is about stretching the play, that's also what Martinelli likes to do in this Arsenal team. And if both are doing that, unfortunately, it doesn't make Martinelli as good of an FPL option. But with the availability of Havertz as a 9 and also Gabriel Jesus, I expect Martinelli to return to a better version of himself in the upcoming game weeks. I think Jesus and Havertz dropping into those little half spaces and allowing Martinelli to stretch a game means that his numbers are going to improve over the coming game weeks. And the reason why I'm talking about Arsenal in general being part of the template midfield, the upcoming fixtures from game week 10 include Sheffield United at home, Newcastle away, Burnley at home and Brentford away. So whereas a lot of managers who wildcarded in game week 8 haven't got any Arsenal players, I think the game week 10 wildcarders need to have at least one Arsenal attacker. And my eyes are currently on Martinelli. Now, the reason why I put Maddison in this is because I know a lot of people already own him. But my debate right now is maybe we could just have Maddison in our teams and sacrifice Son. I really do like Maddison. He's cheaper than Son. His XG per 90 is less than Son. It is worth noting at 0.25 per 90. But the expected assist at 0.43 is ridiculous. And right now what we're getting is a player who is the absolute talisman in this Spurs team, guaranteed minutes, and importantly, just really good underlying numbers. Now, the predicted points for him is actually the worst of all the four options at 16.1. And this might be because of the fixtures coming up for Spurs. If I just read them out for you now, from game week 10 onwards, they have Crystal Palace away, Chelsea at home, Wolves away, and Aston Villa at home. And I'd argue those are four fixtures where they're up against quite tough defences. I think Crystal Palace are good defensively. I think Chelsea are good defensively. So I'm not expecting Spurs to go mega over this period and bag the 4-5 goals that we've seen in previous game weeks. But I think Maddison could be a good opportunity for you to downgrade from Son and just have him as your one Spurs midfielder, because I don't think double Spurs midfield over that period is absolutely essential. And last up, the other two. Bowen, I think, is a popular pick in a lot of teams. And right now, looking at the fixtures from game week 10 onwards, Everton at home, Brentford away, Nottingham Forest at home, Burnley away, I think he is pretty essential in any wildcard team from game week 10 and beyond. Looking at the underlying numbers, the way that he might actually be deployed as a forward with Kudos off the right-hand side in future game weeks just enhances him as an FPL option. And at 7.3 million, he looks fantastic. The other one that I'm really excited to own again is going to be Brighton's Mitoma. A lot of FPL managers have avoided him recently because of the rotation in Europa League and the really tricky fixtures for Brighton. And although they have a tricky game in game week 9, as I mentioned, I think this could be a template midfield from game week 10 and beyond, because Brighton fixtures after that are amazing. Fulham at home, Everton away, Sheffield United at home, and Nottingham Forest away. Now, of course, we need to chuck into the mix that they will have Europa League fixtures over that period, but realistically, I think Mitoma is going to be all on our radars over that period. 6.6 million, XG of 0.32 per 90. I think of all the attackers in that team, he's the one that we can confidently say will play the most minutes. And I think there is going to be an urge to bring him back into our FPL teams. And I really like him as maybe a bit of a differential for those that are wildcarded in game week 10. So last up, what I want to touch on is some game week 9 1-week punts. For those that are maybe looking to wildcard in game week 10, or maybe are sat there with a really nice team, have 2 free transfers, and are just looking for that one player that could elevate them through their ranks. So I have picked 3 players here. Now it's worth noting, I get it, there are probably a lot of better options out there in the game, but they are probably going to be players that are quite highly owned right now. So for example, at Spurs, I would say Son and Maddison are 2 of the best options this game week with their home game against Fulham, and also Pedro Porro as well. They are absolutely fantastic options. But I appreciate that they are probably more popular options in the game, and you might be looking for those differentials. So I've picked 3 here in the shape of Gibbs-White, Gordon, and Jota. All of these I would definitely say are differentials, and I probably would say they are quite risky picks as well. But with their fixtures in hand for this game week in isolation, I think they are some of the best. Nottingham Forest at home against Luton, Newcastle at home against Crystal Palace, and Liverpool at home against Everton, I think are brilliant games for these players. So first up, Gibbs-White. What I would argue is probably the least attacking of all 3 of the options. An XG of 0.15 per 90, and expected assists of 0.25 per 90, and big chances of 0.14. Really isn't decent reading. If I looked at that, I wouldn't be buying a player. But when it's against Luton, then I do think there is definitely potential for him to do well over that period. Now, he would probably be the 3rd pick of these options, but if you have 5.8 million, you want to go for a player that is a bit of a talisman in that Nottingham Forest team, going to play 90 minutes guaranteed, and you can see actually he's predicted to score the most points of the 3 players. I think Gibbs-White could be a really nice, shrewd differential in your FPL teams. Next up, Gordon, just returning from his 1-game ban with those 5 yellow cards. And I've been really impressed with Gordon. An XG of 0.23 per 90 and an expected assist of 0.33 per 90 is really solid reading. And with the absence of Harvey Barnes, I would expect Gordon to come back into this Newcastle team. Now again, it isn't a given. Similar to Gibbs-White, I think he is almost locked in. Gordon's slightly different. I couldn't sit here and tell you who would definitely come back in, but I'll be surprised if he doesn't. And against a Palace team who, it's worth noting, defensively been very good so far this season. But with Newcastle being at home, I always expect them to get the win and accumulate some decent chances. And with the numbers that Gordon's posting right now, I think he could be a really nice option for that 1-game week punt. But the one that I really would like to own, the one that I think is worth owning if we do get confirmation that the likes of Darwin Núñez and Luis Diaz are touch and go for the weekend off the back of the international break, is Diego Jota. Now, he is more expensive at 7.7 million, but his XG per 90 is much better at 0.64. and his big chances per 90 also are massively better than both Gordon and Gibbs-White. So I think Diogo Jota, if we get a hint that Luis Diaz and Darwin Núñez, the fact they're playing away late in South America, they could be touch and go for game week 9 at home against Everton. I would expect Diogo Jota to come back into this Liverpool team. And as a one-game week punt, maybe you're sat there with a Man United midfield and you think to yourself, even though it's Sheffield United away, I am done with these players. I quite like the option of going for Diogo Jota for a one-game week punt. But importantly, let me know in the comments, who is your game week 9 one-week punt? So, guys, that is going to wrap up today's video. I really hope it's provided some value and given you a little bit of food for thought going into the coming game week. That just leaves me to say, thank you so much for listening. If you can, drop a like and smash the subscribe button. That'd be massively appreciated. And as always, I will see you in the next one. Take care. Cheers.